What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 139 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I want to talk to you about Hulk Season 1. This is an original graphic novel from Marvel Comics from about 2012 or so, and this is by Fred Van Lente and Tom Fowler. And this is a very interesting story. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but I'm not sure if I would recommend it, and I will go ahead and get into why. This is a very problematic story. It's got a lot of flaws, but it's also a very interesting story that like I said, I really enjoyed reading. Like some of the other Season 1 books, I don't know if I would say that this actually fits in the normal Marvel universe. Some of the stories actually do kind of sort of fit in the Marvel universe, like Doctor Strange Season 1, I think was the perfect example of it seems like it fits right in between Strange Tales 110 and Strange Tales 115, but then some of the others, they feel like they're just a brand new take on the characters that they're doing a story on, and they don't in any way fit in the normal Marvel universe, which is very strange because some of the editors wanted the books to be Marvel universe stories, like Spider-Man Season 1, Cullen Bunn said that he actually wanted to play around with Spider-Man's origin a little bit, but his editor said, no, we want this to be a canonical Spider-Man origin story. But then that's a very strange editorial mandate whenever you get to stories like Fantastic Four Season 1, where the Mole Man becomes an ally to the Fantastic Four at the end of that story. And then you have something like this, which at times feels like it's just a slight tweaking of the Hulk origin stuff from the Marvel Universe, but then at times it feels like it's pulling from a lot of the more modern sources and making a brand new alternate reality Hulk story. Some examples of that would be, in this story, Betty Banner is not just a useless girl that likes Bruce and is kind of hanging around anytime something dangerous happens. Betty Banner is one of the least useful characters from the Marvel Universe. I would even say characters like Mary Jane and Liz Allen from the Silver Age Spider-Man comics, even they are more interesting and more useful than Betty Banner was, and she's an adult and they were high school students. Betty Banner was not a character that I actually cared for very much in the Hulk stories from the 60s. Here, she actually works at the military base. She's not just some girl who's hanging around her father and always talking about how Bruce is a really nice guy. She actually works there. She works under her father. That is an improvement on the source material. I really like that, even if it does contradict the rest of the Marvel Universe stuff that this is allegedly maybe part of. Then you've got other stuff that it's pulling from. For example, it takes a bit from the 2003 Ang Lee Hulk movie. In that movie, we find out that Bruce Banner is the only person who could have ever become the Hulk because of experiments that his dad did on him genetically. So that kind of made him predisposed to become the Hulk whenever he was exposed to gamma radiation. We have something very similar here, where something that his dad did damaged his chromosomes so that he is the only person who can become the Hulk. That's another change from the source material that I actually don't like, because it means that there cannot be any more gamma characters in this universe. The Leader, the Abomination, the Harpy, Red She-Hulk, regular Red Hulk, regular She-Hulk, Savage She-Hulk, all of those characters cannot exist in this version of the Marvel Universe because apparently you have to have a specific damage done to your chromosomes in order to become a Hulk-like creature when you're exposed to gamma radiation. I don't like that. Also, this takes a little bit from the 2008 Hulk movie with Edward Norton, in that you've got a character, Monica something. She's the character who was in the House of M Hulk storyline by Peter David that I talked about a couple weeks ago. She was part of AIM. She's in the story, and I didn't know that she's actually a very recent character in the Marvel Universe. I figured that she was introduced back in like the 1970s in like an issue of Silver Surfer or something like that, but she was introduced in that Scorpion series from about 2005, and then Peter David used her in his House of M Hulk story, and now Fred Van Lente and Tom Fowler are using her here. And basically they're using her in the same way that Peter David used her. They are saying that she and Bruce had a thing back in college, and then she is brought in to work over Bruce on the Gamma Project at the base. And then she is working on a super soldier program, trying to revive that. And that's very similar to what was going on in the 2008 Hulk movie. But here, she is wanting to use gamma radiation, and somehow she finds out that Bruce Banner is involved with the Hulk somehow. It doesn't really make sense how she figures that out. But then she kind of goes above and beyond, if you will, whenever she finds out that the organization she's working for, they are not going to choose her to do this new super soldier program. They're actually going to choose Ted Sallis, who is the Man-Thing from Marvel Comics. And so she creates this monster using the Hulk process, but then it goes awry, and this monster is called Biocide, and he is actually a soldier who was working at the base, and he had a thing for Betty, but then everyone finds out that he is on heroin, and so he is dismissed from duty, and that leads me into one of my other complaints from this book. This book has way too many bad guys, and it feels very crowded as a result. I think there are about 5 different bad guys in the story. You have AIM, who they are not calling themselves AIM here. They are actually calling themselves them. I don't know why they're calling themselves that, because AIM actually stands for something. Advanced Idea Mechanics. I don't know what them stands for, but they are very clearly AIM. They are wearing the AIM costumes, and they have created a whole bunch of these little boys who are going to be drug factories and also drug mules. They will create drugs in their body, and then they will transport the drugs. And somehow, all of these boys, they are sentient, and they are able to get away from AIM with the Hulk's help at one point. And that's a subplot that is kind of interesting to see, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the rest of the story. It's basically just there to give Rick Jones something to do later on, which I will go ahead and say, I liked some of the changes that this book makes with Rick Jones, because in the early 60s, Rick Jones was a delinquent, but he wasn't really a bad kid. Here, he is a delinquent, but he's a little bit rougher around the edges. He's part of a gang, and he's selling drugs before he meets the Hulk, so he is definitely a darker character than he was in the early 60s, but I really like the way that they basically expand on how he becomes Hulk's friend. In the early 60s, Hulk saves his life, and then Rick Jones just starts following him around, even though the Hulk doesn't really want him to. It's basically just Jar Jar Binks, but in the 1960s. Here, they expand on it a little bit more, and I think it works a little bit better. So I do like Rick Jones in this story, but those little boys that the Them organization is creating, they don't really have anything to do with the rest of the story. And that goes back to me saying that this entire book feels very crowded. We've got so many different bad guys and so many different subplots going on that they all kind of intersect with each other in a very sloppy kind of way. You've got Them, you've got the Gargoyle, who was the first bad guy that the Hulk ever fought in the Hulk issue 1, and he's here, but he's not really doing anything. He is in charge of this gang that Rick Jones is part of, and he's in this book for about 2.5 pages, and then Them, they trick the Hulk into going and defeating the Gargoyle so that they can sell drugs on the street with no competition, which doesn't really make any sense because the Gargoyle has like 6 kids working for him, and Them is a huge organization that has this weird, creepy alien spaceship thing, so it doesn't seem like the Gargoyle would even be a threat to them anyway, but it seems like maybe Fred Van Lente and Tom Fowler just wanted to put the Gargoyle into this book, and so they found some weird way to put him in there that completely goes against how he was presented in Hulk issue 1. So he's there, and he doesn't really need to be, and then you've got Them, and then you've got that woman I talked about who is in Hulk House of M, Monica Rapacensi or something like that. She's here basically doing the same thing that was mentioned in that House of M story, and then she creates Biocide, and then you've also got Biocide himself. And he's kind of the big boss that the Hulk fights at the end, but he's not really presented as a bad guy throughout the first 3/4 of the book. He's presented as a rival for Betty's affections, for Bruce to kind of hate, but he's not really a bad guy until the very end of the book. And that's why this book feels so crowded. I feel like Monica would have been a better bad guy for the end of the book, or Them. I feel like there's any number of ways that you could have gone with this. If you want the Hulk to fight someone at the end of the book, since he's a big monster and you need a bigger monster for him to fight, then you can do something along those lines instead of just creating another bad guy to throw in there at the last act. I felt like that was really kind of just came out of nowhere, and even though the character that Biocide is before he becomes Biocide, he's present throughout the whole book, it still kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere. And speaking of this book feeling very crowded, it also feels crowded from the protagonist's point of view, because you've got Bruce Banner, and then you've also got Hulk, and every time Bruce Banner is on the page, I feel like we're kind of getting him a little bit developed, and then we switch to him being the Hulk, and we don't even get to see any of these transformations. At one point, Bruce is talking to someone, and then at the next point, Hulk is off doing something. And it doesn't make any sense because Bruce is going out into a cave in the middle of the desert, and he's locking himself in this big cell, and then the next point, Hulk is off doing something, and then Bruce wakes up back in the cell. Why would Hulk go back to the cell and put himself in the cell? It doesn't make any sense. Both of these characters don't feel fully developed in order to be the protagonists of this book. And I understand that Hulk and Banner are one and the same, but they both feel half developed. Neither one of them fully feels like the protagonist of this book. And that, once again, goes back to this feeling very crowded. I think that this book could have benefited from being about 30 pages longer, maybe, or if this was part of an ongoing series of original graphic novels. Kind of like how DC did their Earth 1 books that are part of an ongoing series. If they did that with this and with some of the other Season 1 books, if this was part of an ongoing series that's set in an alternate universe version of the Hulk's early days, that would have been very interesting. And then we could have had some of these characters who are in this book, we could have used them in later stories. We wouldn't have had to have had the Gargoyle show up for only 2 pages. We wouldn't have had to have had Biocide just kind of show up at the end and be a big boss that Hulk has to fight. Some of this could have been saved for later volumes, and unfortunately they didn't do that. So, like I said, this is a story that I enjoyed. There's stuff about this that I really liked, but I don't recommend it because it's very problematic. It's got a lot of flaws, unfortunately, and it just doesn't work as a story on its own. It's enjoyable whenever you know some of the stuff that this is referencing. For example, the Monica character who was used by Peter David in the House of M tie-in story. It's enjoyable when you know some of that going into this, but I don't think that this is a good story on its own. Which hurts me to say that because I usually like Fred Van Linte's writing, and Tom Fowler is a very good artist here. I really like his art. But as a story, I don't think that this book works very much at all. So unfortunately, I do not recommend this book. Those are my thoughts on Hulk Season 1. I hope that you guys liked this video. And if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.